I said, well, God just told me what I needed to speak on today. So I don't know why. I'm just gonna say it and do it, and we'll see, you know, if it speaks to any of you, and if it does, that's what it was meant to be. But what I come up with, or where God led me, all I could hear was Dorcas. And if y'all know who Dorcas is, she was in, talks about her in Acts. Luke writes about Dorcas. Dorcas is the Hebrew name, and Tabitha is, Dorcas is the Greek name, and Tabitha is the Hebrew name. But in Acts 9, verses 36 through 42, it says, "Now there was at Joppa a certain disciple named Tabitha, which by interpretation is called Dorcas. This woman was full of good works and alms deeds which she did. And it came to pass in those days that she was sick and died, whom, when they had washed, they laid her in an upper chamber. And forasmuch as Lydda was nigh to Joppa, and the disciples had heard that Peter was there, they sent unto him 2 men, desiring him that he would not delay and come to them. Then Peter arose and went with them. When he was come, they brought him into the upper chamber, and all the widows stood by him, weeping, and showing the coats and garments which Dorcas made while she was with them. But Peter put them all forth, and kneeled down and prayed. And turning him to the body, said, Tabitha, arise. And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand, and lifted her up. And when he called the saints and widows, presented her alive. And it is known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord." Amen. As I was preparing for this, and I'm like, okay, it's still a devotion. So I'm like, this isn't a Bible study. We're not going to be here all day. So I had to kind of condense it down just a little bit, you know, because I'm one of these, I can get long-winded, and I can preach a sermon if you let me. So, but anyway, what is the message here that you know I wanted to present was that, you know, it does say that Dorcas was a disciple. So she was a Christian. This is the time when the disciples, it was after Christ had died, and the disciples had went out and was spreading the word. In this place, a church had already been established, and Dorcas was a believer. So she knew her heart was regenerated. She did the things that she did from within. So, you know, as I was thinking about what I have been doing, being called into the mission field, and I left the mission field quite a few years ago, and I've been praying. You know, God has been, He's been doing things in my life, and I don't understand, and I don't know what's going on and what plan He has for me, but I truly believe that it has got to be from God. Because there's no way that the things that could have happened recently be anything else. It couldn't be from Sharon. It couldn't be from anybody else. And I believe that Dorcas was that way. The things that she did was from the heart. It was God leading her. She knew that. And that's why so many people wanted her to continue to live, because she was such a blessing to them because of what God had done for her. So with that, like I said, I don't know what that message is for or who it's for, but you know, we're all here, and as long as we're led by God, we're going to do the things that He wants us to do. Not to be seen on the outside. I'm not up here for, you know, everybody pat me on the back and say good job. It is because God has given me a message to tell you, and for whatever that may be. Some of you may say, well, I'm not young enough to go to the mission field, or I'm not healthy enough to go to the mission field. But I think Dorcas is an example of how, as long as we are doing the things that we do from a regenerated heart, you know, God can still use us for the mission field. So, in the last few months, like I said, one of the things that I tell people a lot of times is, you know, I says, when God called us to do something, He doesn't change His mind. You know, if He's called us to preach, then He doesn't change His mind. If we preach one time and say, no, that's not for me, that's not accurate. Because God called you, He's always called you. He doesn't change His mind. If He's called me to the mission field, then He's called me to the mission field. When I left the mission field the last time, I haven't been back to Romania, because I said, nope, it's not time for me. Well, God hadn't gave up on me. Just because I quit, I not saying, yeah, you're done because you want to be done. It's because I got in the way. So, with that, I know that he has continued to call me and continued to put it on my heart. But like I said, the last few months, he's really been pulling at my heart again. And I don't know, like I said, my health conditions right now will not allow me to go back to the mission field as per se to Romania. But I can still be a missionary. I've been a missionary in a form here in the United States for all these years. But my heart is still in Romania. And that's kind of what I want to tell you ladies, a few things about my trips and tell you what the needs are still there. And, we'll see where it goes. But one day I was praying, probably about a month and a half ago, I was praying, I'm like, okay, Lord, I says, I know I need to start preparing myself to go back to Romania. I know I'm not ready right now, but I'm like, I don't even know where to start. And I got to thinking, I'm like, but what was the man's name? I'm like, I don't even remember the man's name who helped me with set up my trips and stuff like that. And I was driving along, I was on my way to work, and all of a sudden, just like out of the blue, there was his name. And I'm like, okay, Lord. I says, I'm listening. And he has reunited me and this man through Facebook. John Fracker is his name, and he's probably, I know he's in some of my pictures. I don't know if he's in any on the board or not. But he's on Facebook, and we've been talking. He's in Romania now, and they've just built a mission house so that when missionaries from the United States go over, they have a place to stay and to work out of. So he is continuing to work with those folks there. But anyway, my trips, and I know you can't see my board, but y'all can get up and look at it. I have been on four different mission trips to Romania. Not two, I've been on 4. Mom forgot some. But my first trip was in 2001. I was a student at the Baptist College in Graceville, and that first summer I went on that trip with a group of Partners in Missions International, I think was the name of the group, and I had just found them through the website or the internet or whatever back then, and you pay your plane ticket, your fares and stuff like that. I raised my money through talking to churches and car washes and all that good stuff. But my first 3 trips, 2001, 2002, and 2003, were what were 10-day trips. But it's actually 6 days in the mission field. It takes actually 2 days to get there and 2 days to get back. And it's a long trip. Just because, you fly a certain way and then you have to ride, take a bus the rest of the way, and then by the time you get there and all the time change and all that, it's a kind of an exhausting trip. But we got there and we had 6 days in the mission field. What we did, and each trip was a little different, but the first trip that I had went on was a medical mission. So we had a lot of doctors and nurses and people like that went, and we would go out each day to a different village. We stayed in a town, in a hotel, but we would go out into the little villages out in the country. And the doctors and the nurses would see the people and, kind of help them out. And then, the rest of us, we would go out and just kind of do evangelism. We would talk to the people, we would tell them, about Jesus and, try to win souls for the Lord. We would often do children's ministry. We would, just have like a kids club, and we'd set up in the village and, have fun with the kids and teach them songs and all kinds of stuff. And then at night, we would have, of course, we had preachers with us, and they would go in and to the church, and we would, they would do a sermon, and we would preach and again lead people to the Lord.
Did they understand it?
We had interpreters with us. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I forgot to mention that, but we did have interpreters. A lot of the pictures you'll see, and I could point out which ones are interpreters versus which one are the Americans, but we did have interpreters that went with us everywhere. So we would pay them a little bit, and they would go out with us. So it's kind of a ministry for them, but most of them were from the churches, the local churches, or in town at the churches. So Yes, ma'am. So that
I was
was,
trying to picture y'all up there talking. Understanding a word you said.
no, we would have interpreters, so, and they were kind of used to working with us, you know, or with the Americans. They could speak English, obviously, you know, one of the joke was, you know, America is the only monolingual country in the world. You know, all these other countries, they know their language, they know 2 or 3 other languages, so they knew English and they would be able to communicate with us quite well. So it was really interesting though to know that you had to talk slower or in phrases and
So the
allow them.
interpreter could get it in, okay.
Yes. So it was a very interesting experience. But my first 3 trips were like that. They were the 10-day trips, the 6th day in the mission field, going into different villages. The last of the 3, I ran the kids clubs. You know, I would, you know, in fact, this trip here is where
Like our Bible school.
like a Bible school, yes, ma'am. And so we would just get them together. We, you know, when we got into the village that morning, we'd go and tell them who we are, and y'all come at this time, and they would come, and they would come. I mean, the kids loved it because they, you know, they had so much fun, and we usually brought treats or something, you know, and they just, you know, they loved that. So we would do that, and so anyway, I guess, you know, he says I'm not speaking, but my son is back here. My 3rd short trip, he went with me. So he did go. He's this little fella. Where's my picture?
Is that him right there?
This is, oh, which one?
Yeah, you're pointing at it.
Oh, no.
That's not him, okay.
This is him.
Okay.
This is him right here. He was little. He's not little like that. So, but in fact, this is Legia. This is an interpreter. So she worked with us, and like I said, this was the 3rd short trip. However, my 4th trip, my last trip, was a longer trip. I did 2 months. And what I actually did was I had went in and stayed in a village. I stayed with a family. And Legia was my interpreter. She lived with me. She went with me everywhere. If we left that house, she was with me. And so we were inseparable for 2 months. I paid her to go and be with me. And so in those 2 months, is what I had done was the Romanians were very, I don't even know, I don't want to say chauvinist, but it was to where women could not stand in front of men and teach or preach. So my missions was strictly towards women and children. So the 2 months that I was there, I had set up in this village a women's ministry. I taught 2 days a week to the women, and we had probably about a group like this that would come twice a week, and I would teach on the different women of the Bible, and then 2 days a week I did a kids club, and you know, it was the fall. So, you know, the kids were in school, so it would have to be in the afternoons. I think we did one on Saturday and then one in another afternoon or evening. But we taught them. I prayed that I had set it up to where it would continue after I left. I had made some close connections with some of the ladies and tried to teach them to continue. So, unfortunately, when I left, I kind of left. And I've not been back in touch with this village or these people. When I got in touch with John a month or so ago, he's not in the same area as we were. I'm not exactly sure where he is. The star right here is where I always based out of. Now, the village that I stayed in the 2 months was, I think if I remember correctly, it was a little south. That would be east, I believe. But it was just right outside of Bistrica. Bistrica is like I said, it's a little bit larger town, and had the hotels and everything. If we ever went to town, that's where we would go. Villages, you know, were, like I said, they're kind of smaller. They're little country towns, what we would see as a country town. They may have, you know, just a little, what we would consider like a convenience store to where you could buy bread or some food, but they didn't have, you know, where you can go buy groceries, you know, or a lot of food. Most Romanians lived just very simple. They lived on what they could grow, or what they could harvest themselves. Occasionally, you know, they would the staples that they couldn't, grow or provide for themselves.
How did they make a living?
That was my question. They lived on what they could grow. A lot of them had farms, and they would sell different things. Some of them would go into town and had jobs in the factories. The villages were very small. They were very poor.
Like what kind of factory?
Sorry. They made things such as this. These came from Romania, so they would work in factories to where they would make things and sell those. Some of them worked like in the meat processing factories. That
They didn't have
grocery
American
stores.
factories over there?
No.
Yeah.
No, ma'am. So, a lot of what we take advantage of, what we take for granted, they don't. A lot of things that we see as unacceptable is very acceptable for them. The adults worked, period. The children took care of the children. And so, but if you were old enough to work, you went to work. So it was the little kids taking care of the smaller children.
How was it before they let them go to work?
They could go to work at 11, 12, 13. So, it would depend. It's usually just in the fields and what have you. So, it wasn't like a job. A lot of orphanages in Romania, parents who were too poor to take care of their children would send the children to the orphanage so that they could be taken care of.
Like in their houses, did they have running water?
No, ma'am. They had wells. We could not drink the water there because obviously we would get sick. So we always had bottled water, but they had wells in their yard. If it was a real poor family, a lot of times they wouldn't have a well. They would have to go to a neighbor. And
Well, since they didn't have water in the house, the toilets were outside?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good old outhouses.
Like we used to have a long time ago, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And that's what I'm like looking, because it's been a while since my poor board, it's seen better days. It got wet and it's looking bad. But there are, I think I've got a picture somewhere, and that's why I don't know if it's on the board, but a little girl that had the pail that she was carrying the water back to her house. There's a little boy here with a loaf of bread that he got sent to the store. I'm sorry, I was hoping to have it closer. But he went to the store and was bringing home a loaf of bread. It's not wrapped like ours, it's not all nice and neat and pretty, sliced or anything. It's just a loaf of bread.
And it's made over there?
Yes, ma'am.
So it's not shipped in or nothing?
No, ma'am. And they do have like the little bakeries or whatever that they would, do it right there in the town.
Well, did they have, with their ovens, were they like clay pits outside or what?
Ooh, you don't remember, do you? It wasn't outside. They would have like a separate room that was kind of their kitchen. I was trying to remember the house that I stayed in. It was kind of set off to the side. It wasn't attached to like where the bedrooms and the bathrooms were. The house that I actually stayed in the 2 months, they did have some running water, and so we would have a bath. We were able to bathe. They made sure that it was a little bit more influential family. So when I stayed, I didn't have to worry about bathing in out by the well. So so we did have that. So they thought because of course I paid the family to stay there as well, and so with the money that I was providing them, they went and bought what they call a washing machine. And basically, all it was though was where it spun. You still had to wash the clothes in the tub, and they put it in the washing machine to spin.
Like we used to do, long time ago.
Yeah.
And we did it. We did it for 2 months. But Jacob was with me those 2 months. That's why when he showed up, I was wanting Nora to come, but when Jacob showed up, I'm like, hey. He says he's not talking about that. He was very young, and
He's reminiscing while you're talking.
he's trying to remember. I think his memories just kind of slipped a little bit more
Did
so than
these
mine.
families like have lots of children, or would they just have like 2, or?
Most of them just had 2 or 3. They usually did not have a lot of children. Because of being poor, they knew that they couldn't support the children. There were families who didn't have any children because they knew that they could not support them.
Why over here they try to have
Wow,
so
how
many?
conscious, how socially conscious they were.
Right. And they knew. So, the men, these people in the villages couldn't afford to go to the hospital or the doctors. That's why we did the medical missions, to, even Tylenol and things that, like I said, that we take for granted. They could not afford, and a lot of the men would pass away a lot younger than the women. There were a lot of older women, and they were widows and have to fend for themselves the best that they could. So
Were they monogamous, or would they have?
they were monogamous, yes ma'am, yes ma'am. So they were very moral people. They were very, very loving. They were just good people. Very good.
Appreciate anything you do.
Anything that you would do. And, anything, when we would go, if we were offered anything, it would be an insult not to accept it, they would have chicken soup, and that was a treat.
Brother Jerry's hard of hearing, talk loud.
He's over taking a nap.
How long did one of my hearing aids?
What else can I tell you about Romania? I will let you ladies ask me questions. I do better with questions. So do y'all have any questions for me?
Did you walk everywhere you went, or did you have a vehicle, or what?
No ma'am, we walked everywhere. Now, when we went into the villages, of course, when we went from the streets into the villages, we would have a bus that would transport us, because it would be 20 or so miles. But once we got to the village, the bus would go back to town, and we would walk. The villages were relatively small. You can kind of see some of the pictures where some of them were a little larger, but we would still, even when we were in Bistrica, we would walk, and it was always our joke. And I don't know if I'm sure he remembers this one. He better remember this one because it's been a joke for years. But anytime we would go somewhere, we would ask our interpreters, well, how long will it take us to get there? How far is it? Oh, just 5 or 10 minutes. Just everywhere you went, it was only 5 or 10 minutes.
Did that stick true to nature?
Oh, yeah. Maybe an hour later we'd be there. Do you remember that one? Please tell me you remember that. Okay.
Were the streets paved or dirt?
The city streets were paved. Some of the villages were dirt. So I wore sandals all the time, so my feet would be very dirty at the end of the day, but it was okay. It was very eye-opening experience.
Did, well, I don't raise my hand, but did, many
But you
people,
talk loud enough, we can hear you.
did there many people over there have their own automobiles?
No ma'am, hardly any had cars or automobiles. They would scare us half to death whenever they would drive us. If we ever went anywhere in a small vehicle, man, the drivers, we had drivers that did have some cars, like I said, if we had to go somewhere else, we had drivers, and there was no speed limit. So, little small roads, if you can imagine the little small country roads that we might have around here in South Alabama, they were like that. And hilly, curvy and all this stuff, and all of a sudden you come around a curve and they had horses and carts, and so they would be going down the road too, and you'd have to slam on brakes so you didn't hit the horse and the cart. But it was an experience. So, because the horse and carts had just as much right on the road as what the cars did.
What about the hotels like you stayed in and all? Were they like modern like we have here, or were they?
Not like what we have here, but they were nice. Of course, just the architects is going to be a little bit different. We did have running water in the hotels.
Well, who would want to go over there?
It's not a tourist country.
Except missionaries. Who would stay in the motel?
Well, actually, the one that I stayed in was where Bram Stoker wrote Dracula.
Wow.
It was pretty awesome. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So, because as I was saying earlier, I don't know who I was talking to, but I was saying earlier, where we stayed at, if you look at Bistrica, that is in the region of Transylvania. The mountains that Dracula's castle is there. There's actually a Dracula's castle. It's a museum. But they have set it up, and that's where Dracula lived and all that. I had the opportunity to go there my first or second trip, and I kind of declined. I says, well, I'm here for a mission trip.
They're sightseeing.
For sightseeing. So I didn't ever make it there, but it was very interesting. So, but yeah.
Are they all under one political rule?
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me.
They are?
Yes, ma'am.
And so do they just come in and take over the guns, or how do they get to be in positions of authority?
Well, they have a government. I don't know much about the government and how it's set up. The capital is Bucharest, and it does rule. It does. They were under communism until the 80s, 1980s, I believe, is when they came out from under communism, and then they had their own government set up. All of the young men from 18 to I think 20 or 21 served in their military. They're trained in their military. So occasionally you can go through town and you'll see, young
Did
men.
you see guns?
They had guns on their back, yes ma'am.
Okay.
They open them, they carried them openly,
Okay.
the rifles and stuff. So, I never felt threatened or anything about
When
it. They were
our
not.
government sends troops to Romania,
Who did?
our
Ours?
government,
Do we have a base there?
I guess we do, because know of people that, have trained, and they say they've got to go to Romania for a certain length of time.
Oh, really?
So I don't know why, but, it's in their training.
I know that, when we would go, we were driven into Romania by bus from, usually we would fly into Hungary. And so we would have to go from Hungary and take a bus into Romania. And it was always kind of a scary thing there. I don't know, we're talking about early 2001, 2002. So we were always told not to make eye contact with the government officials, at the airports when they were checking passports. And when we would have to stop at the border going into Romania, and they would have to check passports and things such as that. And then I'm not sure about, our American soldiers in there. We never saw any American soldiers. Like I said, the country itself is not aggressive. So we just never felt threatened by it. So.
I bet they don't get divorces over there, do they?
Do they have any say about who they marry?
I'm just asking. I mean,
That's why I wanted to know if they were monogamous.
well, I'm just asking that, though, but I'm sure that don't mean all of them live right.
Well, and I'm not saying that none of them get divorces. They do have divorce and they can get a divorce, but it was just not that common. I mean, if a man would move out if he, didn't like his wife, but he wouldn't go live in with somebody else. He would just,
Live alone and die.
Go by himself.
I doubt he was alone, but he might.
But that's what I'm
have
saying, but the men a lot of times would die young. So they didn't, a lot of men live to be old.
And it's not heavily populated, so it's not like you've got,
A lot of options.
a lot of options.
No, you don't. I think that's the biggest thing with the monogamy, is because there's not a lot of options, especially if you're in a village.
Especially.
I
Because
wonder how they maintain their borders with all those other countries around them.
well, like I said, they do have the military, the government there, and they do check us at the border. They will check you. And they'll check our passports, and they check the reason why we're there, and we have to have, the documents of why we're going there. We have to have, I think which I wasn't responsible for that because I wasn't leading the group, but, the group has to have the invitation from the churches and stuff like that for us to actually go in.
When you went the first time, how did you feel when you got home?
That explains.
That answers your question.
It was very difficult. I don't know if anybody here's been on a foreign mission trip, but it's very difficult. I had been outside of the country before, but I had never been to a full country. The things that you see, the things that you experience, it really, really opens your eyes to what we have here. How blessed this country is.
I bet you thank God for a lot of things that you never thought you would.
That's the way my son Bobby is, that was in the Navy. He said he could live without anything. Because he'd seen so much, did not. But now, how did you feel towards, what kind of feeling did you get from those people? Did they want you there, or did they want you gone, or did they?
I could have stayed there. I could have stayed there.
And you didn't have any fear for your life?
I never did. I never did anyway. me, I guess, in a way. I mean, I know God's got me, so whatever His will is, that's what that is. I never feared for my life. The first time that I went, there was a lot of questions, Sharon, why do you wanna go to this part of the country, or world, with all this that's going on in the Middle East, and and I'm like, I'm not worried about that. This is where God's telling me to go.
Okay.
So, that's all I can say, it's not my decision. No, I never did fear for my life over there. They loved us. However, one of the bits of information that I don't think I've shared is Romania is predominantly Romanian Orthodox religion.
I was gonna ask, what were the other, was Christianity prevalent?
I think probably over the years it has become more prevalent than what it was, because there are so many missionaries that are going into the country now. Like I said, my first trip in 2001, we're not even 20 years past communism. So, it was still, Christianity was still very, very new. The idea was very new. So I don't know what's happened in the last 15 years, to be honest with you. But it was predominantly, at that time, Romanian Orthodox. The priests did not like us. They did not like to see us come into the villages. They were very closed to the idea, because it was a threat to them. In fact, one of the groups that I was with, a man and his wife and I were talking to some of the village people out in the streets, and the Romanian man was very anxious, very nervous acting. Kept looking over his shoulders, and right there close to the Orthodox Church, and he just was very didn't want to talk, and he was, through the interpreters, they were talking about why, we were here, and he's like, I go to the Orthodox Church, and the priest came out, and the man, I gotta go, and he took off, but then the priest came out and spoke to the missionaries, and, well, God bless you, but he did not like us there. There were rumors that the priest would threaten the Romanians, that they could not, go to our church services, that he would get them. So, it was, they were very scared of the priest.
That was about like Jesus when he healed a woman that was, I think it was a woman or man that was earning so much money for the others, and they got real mad and ran him out because he did that, because they were losing a lot of money.
That's right.
From that person being healed.
Yes, ma'am. One of the things that I did, another thing I just kind of want to share real quick was, a lot of people ask, well, so when we send money over to foreign countries, for missions and stuff like that, what does it do? Where does it go? And one of the things that, and I don't know how y'all want to do this, is very similar picture, so I think I'll go this way. But these pictures here are of a church that was being built. I think my first trip, in one of it was kind of a larger village, I guess, maybe you would even call it a town, because there was more people here. It was paved streets, and what have you, but they were building this church, and they were working on it.
A Christian church?
It was a Christian Baptist, it was a Baptist church. And so, the second time I went, or the next time I went back, this was the result. I'm sorry. This is what, where it was at, the stage that it was at whenever. So then, when we send money to foreign countries, it's not just for the Americans to go there and have fun. They're actually using the money to do ministry and to make a difference in this country. So we, with that, we continue to, I guess that's what I was thinking, is my place right now is to continue to support these missionaries and these people. My heart's still there. I pray that God's going to see me to go back, or find fit for me to go back. So, I I guess the way that this came up about me being here today was when I got back in touch with, John, and I says, what can I do to help? You're over there, I can't go right now, what can I do to help? And they are actually, trying to get some, shoe boxes done for Christmas for the elderly. Because there are elderly, and like I said, there are some men, there's not as many men as there are women, but there are some men there, so they're trying to get some shoe boxes done. He has sent me a list. I don't know if y'all wanna
Cool.
pass them around or whatever.
I wanna do some shoe boxes.
So there are some things that they would like in the shoe boxes for Christmas, if any of you want to do them.
What time? Do you have the time that we need to have them
I
back?
think it's on there, he said that they
Yeah.
needed to be shipped by the 1st of October.
Okay.
Cool.
So probably if we want to look at the end of September collecting them, and he told me to get back in touch with him, and he'd, give me instructions on how to ship them. But
Okay.
it'll take a little while to get them over there, it takes a long time just to get there. So, that's something, if we want to do that, we can, kinda help them out some. And I think that would, I'm gonna do some myself personally, but if any of you want to do any, we can do it as a church, as a ministry. So, and that would help them out for Christmas. And that's what I'm saying, these things on this list even are very simple, and we think, oh, that.
Take it for granted.
Yeah, a tube of toothpaste, really, a
Yeah.
toothbrush, I
Yeah.
mean, and maybe some crochet scarves.
It's pathetic. We Americans are so spoiled.
Yes.
We are.
Yes.
We are very spoiled. Things that, like I said, even the poor people in this country, have more than what most of these.
Than
people
most regular folks have
Yes.
overseas.
Now, they mention men's underwear, but they don't mention the women's underwear.
They don't wear it. Okay.
I think my mother must have been part Romanian.
Seriously.
It would probably
All those single men have confiscated all the ladies' underwear.
That might be one they need.
Well, I think that it would be very appropriate and women's the same as men.
I believe it would as well, Miss Katie. I do, I believe it would as well. So I
Would they
think-
like the plastic boxes more than just regular shoe boxes like you get shoes out of?
If you would, and I've not thought about that, but if we did that, if we could do that, that would be probably awesome, because they probably could use those containers for other things. So,
That's a great idea.
In some cases, they
My
don't.
daughter goes to church in Mississippi, and they do the shoe boxes every year. And they found that they go to the Dollar Tree and buy the plastic ones with the lids that snap on.
right,
And it works out way better
There we go.
for them than the cardboard, because then they have something else that they can use.
right, and that's what I'm saying, I think that they could.
I think the shoe boxes
Yeah, the
are even
ones that-
cheaper
yeah,
at
about the
Sam's, they
same.
come,
You know what
they come so
I
many
fixed
for
those
a little bit cheaper than you pay a dollar a piece. Most of them are a dollar a
and
piece,
found
you
out
can
that
get
I
them for a
can
dollar a
You
piece.
buy
but-
shoes, you
and
get
give up them.
No,
Then you
she's
keep your
talking
shoes
about
in
their
your
plastic
box.
shoe boxes.
Things cheaper
Hey,
than
what
what
are you
I
talking
can.
about?
She's talking about them
But
plastic.
they
I mean,
know
We
that
save our,
they-
you
is
save
that
your
a
shoe
month for
boxes, don't
Christmas?
you? I mean, do you
I
keep
keep
your
my
shoes
shoes
in
in
your
my
box?
box.
Oh, I do.
But you're talking about the plastic.
That's what,
Yeah, and I think Sam's has got them like,
Okay.
maybe 8 or 10, in a package together,
Sand
or cheaper than you
I
can
call
get.
them, give them my credit card number and tell them what I want to give.
Okay.
And you can even pick out, they have different things.
Do y'all have any other questions about Romania? I've got one other thing, but I
Okay.
wanna make sure that we've got all our questions.
I got a lot of questions, but I have to cook lunch.
I had brought my speaker, and as I was trying to set up, I dropped it, I think I busted the speaker on it. So I'm hoping my phone is gonna be loud enough by itself, and we can actually hear, but I am gonna teach, hopefully, teach you a new way to sing an old song. We don't have the piano, so we can't get Mrs. Ned to play the, oh, wait, I need one. I need one. Okay, there'll be extra one here.
You know, we're coming back from Birmingham the other day in Montgomery. They had this big sign all the way across the road. It had ABCs all the way up in it, on it. And I thought, well, that's neat.
Oh,
It's food for taco. Look,
Yes,
that's
yeah.
neat.
I wonder why they had ABC.
I don't know.
Ooh. Lots of vowels in that.
So, everybody get one? Okay, we are gonna try this. I'm still struggling with it myself a little bit, but I've been practicing, so I'm hoping that I can do some of it. Y'all know how it goes. Y'all know the song, what you think?
Jesus loves me, this I know.
No.
For the helps me so. Now, I can't say the other, so you can get it.
Okay, well, as I said, I got a hold of John a couple months ago, but as I was going through and trying, you know, I'm like, well, what about Legia? Legia, remember, was my interpreter. She worked with us on each of our trips, but she was the one that lived with me the 2 months that I stayed there. And so I got a hold of Legia. Legia actually married an American. She lives close to Jacksonville, Florida, so we're going to be seeing each other soon. But so I asked her. She was the one who interpreted for me and gave me the words that y'all have. And I says, well, is there any way we can get, because we used to teach this song to the children, you know, and you know, they didn't know it. So we would teach it in English, in American, but then they would teach us after they learned it in Romanian. So I says, have you got any videos with the kids singing it? I've got some, but there's no way, you know, from the technology then to now, I don't know how to get it to where we can see it now. But she did this for me, so I'm hoping y'all can hear it. Like I said, my speaker's busted, but. Alright, y'all ready? And knowing a little bit, I tried to learn a little bit of the language there, and again, I'm trying to unpack some of my stuff to find all my stuff from Romania. I could not find my journal that had a lot of the words that I had translated. But looking at this, I know Jesus, of course, is Jesus. Iubeste is love. I got that one. So Biblia is Bible. The Biblia me is me. The Bible tells me. So I got that one. On the fourth line down, the Copelashe is children. And I got thinking, I'm like, well, the word children is not in our version, but it does have the little ones.
Little ones.
So that would be the children. And then da Iumeste is again, da is yes. And then we say, well, where's Jesus in that? The ma is another word for God or Jesus. So, yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yel is another term for God. There was a lot of different terms for Jesus or for God, for the Christ. So, and then Asha was at the very end, the last word is so, where the Bible tells me so. I remember that one because the lady that I lived with for 2 months, the Romanian lady, at the end of the day, she'd be like, Asha, Asha, Asha. And I kept asking Alicia, I'm like, what is she saying? She says, that's kind of like to be translated in so. You know, that's where we're exhausted at the end of the day. So it's always, okay. So that's how I knew what that word was. So, you know, and any, I think any foreign language, you know, there is some differentiation in how we say it. It's not word for word, as we know it, but.
Lost in translation.
Yes, ma'am. But it is Jesus loves me, and to teach that to the Romanian children, and to hear them say that, and to hear them leaving, singing that, was always a blessing.
Amazing.
So, yes, ma'am. So,
Did you have any special way you wanted to end it?
that was pretty much it. If somebody would like to pray and close us, that would, or,
Well, we're gonna do what we did last night,
okay.
and with everybody to stand and join hands.
Up here too, if anybody wants to stay in somewhere.
They take a couple times there.
For those of you that were not with us before, what we're gonna do, I want you to think of something you're thankful for, or many things you're thankful for. And we're gonna all pray at one time. And when you feel like you're finished, stop, and Betty, if you will close for us, will you? Okay. All right. Just start praying. Lord, I thank